Good afternoon. My name is Colin Childs and I'm an instructor with the Educational Product team here in Redlands, California. Joining me today is Tom Brenneman, who's the ArcEditor Product Manager here at ESRI. I want to welcome you all to today's live training seminar. Our seminar today will be covering three main topics. We'll be discussing productive editing techniques, solving feature adjustment problems, and adding more editing tools to ArcMap. The format of the presentation will be a discussion of some new topics, a brief software demonstration, a review of what we've discussed, and some questions and answers taken by Tom Brenneman. Our first topic for this afternoon, entitled Productive Editing Techniques, is geared to improve your editing experience by teaching you several new techniques that will make you more productive. I'm going to present you with some common challenges and then show you some solutions to those challenges in order to help you become more effective in how you do your work. The first challenge that we have this afternoon is to look at multiple layers and selecting from multiple layers. So as a challenge, how do I go about modifying my feature selection when I have several layers that I may be selecting features from? In other words, how do I modify the selection of an individual layer? The solution to such a problem is to use the Selection tab in our table of content. The Selection tab, added recently to our table of content, allows you to see which layers you're currently selecting from, and in fact to see how many features are being selected from each layer. Notice I have parcels, 23 features selected from that layer, and 9 features selected from the zoning layer. So the Table of Contents Selection tab is a very useful way for you to figure out whom you're selecting from. A right mouse click on that Selection tab will give you the option of choosing additional options such as Clear Select Features, Switch Selection, Select All. In fact, you can even create a layer from the selected records that you may have selected from a particular data source that you're working with. This is very useful for you, but perhaps you may want to further refine your selection. And a suggestion here, and a really neat tip and trick, is of course to go to the Attributes dialog. And from the Attributes dialog, you can choose from the selected features in the zoning layer, for example, and unselect an individual record from those. Again, very useful in order to refine the current selection. Another particularly interesting selection challenge is when you're trying to select features from layers that overlap each other. Notice that both my parcel and zoning layers overlap each other, and when I select a parcel of land, I may also inadvertently select the zoning layer feature below. This is a particular problem, and if I'd like to focus my selection or perhaps cycle through the overlapped features, what do I do about that type of situation? Now, this is a really useful tip that I'm going to give you here, and that's to use the N for next key while you're currently selecting. So notice on the left-hand side here, my current selection tolerance is illustrated by the blue circle. And notice that the first time I use the selection, it's chosen the box feature. But perhaps I'd like to focus my edit on, for example, the polygon feature, or, for example, the line feature. And the way that I cycle through the selected features within the current snap or selection tolerance is to hold the N key down on my keyboard. That's a very useful function, and I hope you're going to use that one from time to time. Another selection challenge we find fairly often is that once we've selected a feature, we may have inadvertently moved that feature without really thinking about it or without really intending to move the feature. How do I solve that problem? Well, very simple way to solve the problem is to use a sticky move tolerance. So from my editing menu, under editing options, I have a choice of typing in a specific sticky move tolerance. The sticky move tolerance here represents a distance within which features will not move. Only once the sticky move tolerance has been exceeded will the feature actually move. This is very useful to prevent you from doing things or moving features without really intending to. Let's look at some snapping challenges. So we've categorized these into snapping challenges, selection challenges, and sketching challenges. So let's have a look at a snapping challenge that occurs fairly often. Now, I'm not sure about you, but while I'm snapping features during a sketch, during an edit, I often like to figure out whom I'm snapping to or which features I'm snapping to. And that's kind of difficult to do unless I know what I'm doing. Well, there are several different ways of actually being able to see whom I'm snapping to. One is to look at the snapping indicator. In my lower left-hand corner of the ArcMap application on the status bar, notice, as I'm illustrating, the layer name and the snap agent that is currently active. This is part of the software and very useful for you to be able to determine whom you're snapping to. A second option you may want to turn on from your Edit Options menu is the use of the snap tips. Snap tips will, as you sketch, automatically display a snap tip for you for a brief second before fading away. A word of warning here, I'm going to be using snap tips during our demonstration, but you might not see the snap tip since the encoding technology that we're using to send you this presentation does not really encode snap tips very well. The third way you can visualize your snapping is to use the T key on your keyboard. So while you're sketching a feature and you would like to see if your current snapping is within the snapping tolerance, holding down your T key will give you a circular radius illustrating the current setting for your snap distance. And in fact, the snap distance is usually set from your edit options by typing in a value either in pixel units or map units to represent the current snapping tolerance distance. Let's take a look at an additional snap challenge. And this one is how to gain more control over the feature snapping, or which features snap to which other features. You should already be aware of the snap environment, and I hope you've been using this to create several snap agents. Just a few tips with regards to the snapping environment and snapping in general. Setting your snapping tolerance is done in the editing dialog, as we're already aware. And remember, you can set this tolerance both in pixel values or in map units. My recommendation is to set the value in pixel units, which is scale independent, whereas setting a snap tolerance in map units will require you to change that snap tolerance as you zoom in and zoom out on the data. Something to help you set the snap tolerance interactively is the use of the snap tolerance tool, and I'm actually pointing at this one with my cursor on screen right now. This tool is not automatically exposed, but can be exposed if you use the Customize dialogs under your Tools menu and you drag and bring across this tool to your interface. I'm going to be showing you some of this in our final demonstration a little later today. One more area I'd like you to be attentive about is the ability for you to prioritize your snap agents. So in the snapping environment, when you create a snap agent, such as this example here, where I've set two snap agents, one for parcel vertexes and one for parcel ends, and another, third one in this case, for zoning edges. You can prioritize your snap agents by dragging them up and down in the list of the snapping environment. So if I drag zoning above streets and parcel below zoning, I'm prioritizing the zoning snap agents to happen to act before the parcel snap agents would. Again, a very useful way of determining what snapping will occur at which point in time. A third snapping challenge I'd like to offer to you is the need from time to time to override your current snapping. Perhaps what you need to do is you'd like to snap to a particular kind of geometry for which you have not set a snap agent. Or perhaps you'd like to temporarily suspend snapping and use another snapping technique. Or perhaps you haven't even set a snap agent and you'd like to enforce a snapping to a vertex or an edge at a particular point while you're busy sketching. So how do we override the snapping environment? Well, this is done very easily during your current sketch task by using a right mouse click to get to the context menu. And on the context menu, you'll notice a tool option called Snap to Feature. The Snap to Feature allows you to create a snap on the fly. In other words, Snap to Feature will allow you to override current snapping environment settings. In other words, it'll let you snap to feature geometry, such as the midpoint of a feature or the end point of a feature or a vertex of a feature, without the need to set an actual snap agent beforehand. This is particularly useful while you're sketching and you'd like to do an on-the-fly snap. You'll also notice an option called Snap to Midpoint, which is not found in the snapping environment. And this is a specialized type of snapping that'll snap to the midpoint of a line or a polygon edge or boundary as you are busy editing or creating a new feature. By the way, you can also temporarily suspend any snapping that you have set by pressing down your space bar. That's a quick way to temporarily suspend snapping. Well, now that we've discussed the snapping challenges, let's take a look at some sketching challenges. One of the interesting challenges is I may be sketching a new feature, as I'm pointing out here, and I may temporarily want to suspend the sketch tool, and I'd like to return back to my edit tool to do some other edit task, and then return back to the sketch tool. In fact, I don't want to lose what I've already sketched, but I don't want to finish the sketch feature either. How would I go about doing this? Well, the way to do that is to use shortcut keys. And this is one of the things I'd really like to emphasize with you today, is that shortcut keys will make you very, very efficient. By using them, you can perform actions within other actions. For example, as I mentioned, I'd be sketching, hold down my E key, temporarily suspend the sketch. That'll give me the edit tool. I may do some action with the edit tool, such as a selection, and then press my E key again, which returns me back to my sketch tool. I'm going to illustrate some of this for you in the demonstration, but the idea is that you can use these shortcut keys to great effect to invoke new actions while you're busy with a current action. Holding the Z key, for example, will allow you to zoom in. Holding your X key will allow you to zoom out. And using the C key while you're sketching will allow you to pan interactively and then return back to your sketch tool again. These shortcut keys are very, very powerful, and in fact there are many of them. To find out what they are, I'd recommend looking at the ArcGIS Desktop Help, and from the Index tab typing in shortcuts for editing in ArcMap. By doing so, you'll see a very comprehensive list of all the different shortcuts that are available in the software. And keep in mind, you can even create your own shortcuts for common actions that you perform or common kinds of edits that you perform. My second sketch challenge is how I may want to, or how I could use units of a different type from the current map units of my data. Perhaps my data would be in feet, and I'd like to sketch a new feature and specify lengths in meters. This is a fairly common thing with data that you find newer and older data sets. How would I go about doing that? Well, here's the interesting thing. All the sketch tools inside of ArcMap honor the ability for you to type in an abbreviation for a unit. So my current map units in the example here are in feet, but I would like to type in the length of a new feature's boundary in meters. So as I'm sketching and I right mouse click, choose the length option, I can type in the value, in this case 50, and M, the abbreviation for meter. What now happens is the software automatically applies the conversion constant for meter to feet, and my new feature is constrained within that appropriate distance for me. I didn't have to remember what the conversion constant was. It was done for me automatically. Now this is really very useful, and if you look at the far right hand side of the page, you'll notice a list of abbreviations that are acceptable to our software and can be used at any point in time when you're using any sketch tools. In fact, virtually any tool in the editing environment that requires the input of some kind of length or measure will accept these abbreviations. Something to look forward to and something to use. Really, really powerful. Let's take a look at a third sketching challenge. And this is a challenge where I may have a new feature created, such as this road here. Notice I'm pointing to the road. And I have some underlying polygon features that intersect with the road. And what I need to do is remove or take away the road right-of-way from the polygon features. Now, generally, this would be a two-step process. I would have to select the line, I'd have to buffer the line, I'd have to clip the polygon features. A two-step process generally. How do I go about doing this in a very simple way during an edit inside of ArcMap? Well, here's how I do it. I select the line feature. This is my source that I'm going to use as a basis for clipping. I take the buffer distance or the clip tool from the edit menu. I type in a buffer distance to clip by. I specify my target layer to be the polygon layer. I choose the OK option, and what happens is the polygon features underlying or intersecting will be clipped away. In this way, I've done both a buffer and clip as a single action inside of an edit tool using the clip tool that I may have available. Now, my final sketch challenge for this particular section is something that you may find quite often is, how do you know where you're working when you're using a really large data set? In other words, I may be editing a single feature in this area I'm showing you here, but I need to keep track of the entire study area where I may be working. How do I do this? In other words, how do I focus my edit on a particular area as well as keep track of a larger area or extent? Well, one way to do this is to use the Overview window. And the Overview window, available from your Windows menu, will give you a large overview of the entire study area and then show a rectangular box to illustrate the current extent in your map display area. So you're able to see where you're focusing your edit within the largest study area of the entire data set. Now that's very, very useful. Another very useful option is to use the magnifier window, also available from your Windows option. The magnifier window will allow you to drag the window across your map display, and in the process of dragging across the map display, it will magnify the current extent or current area that you're pointing at the center of the magnify window. It's like having this moving magnify window across your page. And it becomes even more fun when you can right mouse click on the magnify window and snapshot what you're magnifying. Notice I have two snapshots here of two different study areas I would like to focus and edit on. So this is also very useful. Within any of the snapshot windows or within the full map display window, I can do an edit. So I can focus my edit on either the snapshot, an enlarged version, or on the original scale of the data and edit in that as well. This is how I usually do things when I have multiple edits. I make several snapshots and then interactively edit in each snapshot window and complete my edits that way. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this last topic. Let me illustrate some of these things for you during a software demonstration. Now, looking at this in front of you, notice that I have demo1.mxd available. Notice I have demo1.mxd available at this point in time, and I have 4 different layers in this data set. The 4 different layers that I have here are roads, buildings, parcels, and tracts of land. Let's start an edit session, and we're going to edit some of this data. Before we start editing, a good thing for us to do would perhaps be to go and set some of the snapping tolerances and set some of the snapping agents that we may be using. So I'm going to go down to the Options menu, and notice my current snapping tolerance is set at 15 map units. I in fact would like to use a 30 pixel unit at this point in time. Remember, I mentioned the pixel units are specifically going to give you the option of zooming in and zooming out and having the snapping tolerance work pretty well. Another important thing I'm going to do here is also set my current sticky move tolerance to, say, 40 pixels. I'm also going to ensure that snap tips are currently set on, and in fact they are checked on right now. Let's choose the OK option and have these options set for us. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to set up some snapping agents. Now the first set of features I intend to edit would be roads, and I'd like road vertexes and edges to be able to snap to vertexes and edges of land parcel. Notice how I have moved or have checked on these different snap agents. I'm also going to prioritize and place land parcels below roads. So road snapping will occur first, land snapping will take precedence after road snapping. Let's dismiss the snapping environment at this point, and let's use a bookmark to zoom to the area that we'd like to create the new road feature. Bear in mind that at this point I'm going to create a new feature, so my current task will be create new feature. I'm going to use the standard sketch tool, and notice as I'm moving around how snapping occurs. And in fact, the snapping is a little erratic, and at this point I've snapped to road vertex. As I start moving, notice how snapping is a little too erratic. So I've already incorporated the snap tolerance tool, and I'm pointing at it right now. I'm going to bring the snap tolerance tool in and actually set a visual snap tolerance rather than the 30 pixel wide snap tolerance I'd set earlier. I can check that the snap tolerance tool has worked by returning back to my edit options, and I notice that my snap tolerance is now set to 8 pixels. Now that's one of the cool tricks, is finding the snap tolerance tool and exposing it. Let's continue sketching. So let's choose the sketch tool again and let's start sketching. Now, my intention is to sketch a new line that represents a road right across here. But my current intention is also to show you how you can use some of the different shortcut keys to make things a little easier for yourself. So the first shortcut key I'm going to show you is the use of the zoom key. So notice I'm still sketching and I'm going to hold down my Z key. As I hold down the Z key, I can zoom in on the current study area that I'm working on. So I may create another vertex and another vertex. Perhaps I'd like to pan a little, so I hold down my C key at this point. And notice how I've changed to the pan tool as I temporarily suspend my sketch. Now, at this point, I may want to temporarily suspend the sketch and return back to the edit tool. So I hold down my E key. Notice how the cursor has changed and my edit tool is currently active. In this case, I'm going to select several polygons, and then to return back to my sketch, hold down the E key, and notice how my sketch tool returned back to me again. As I start sketching, I may want to zoom out a little. So I'm going to use my X key at this point, and I'm going to zoom out from where I currently am working. I'm going to use my C key to pan across, and then I'm going to complete the sketch that I have created. And in that way, I will have created a new feature. The intent here was to show you the use of shortcut keys more than to create the new feature. Let's change our bookmark, and let's have a look at the Select Next function. Now, at this point, I'd like to illustrate how you can select a feature that overlaps others and how you can toggle between the overlap. So let's change our focus to the Selection tab. And notice how I currently have one road feature selected. I'm going to clear the selected road feature, and I'm going to change my selection tolerance and make it a little smaller at this point in time. And let's select one of these buildings. Now notice how the Selection tab illustrates my buildings. One building feature is selected. By depressing my N key on my keyboard, notice from the Selection tab how I now have a land parcel polygon selected and how one of the tracts are now selected. The tracts have a larger extent, by the way. This is why you're not seeing them. But by using the N key on my keyboard, I'm able to cycle through multiple features that are in overlap with each other. Let's clear our selected feature, and let's return back to the Display tab. Let's illustrate the use of the Clip tool for you. We go to Bookmarks, and we'll use the Clip feature bookmark. Now, at this point in time, notice I have a new road that is being created, but I've not removed the road right-of-way from the underlying polygon feature. So my intention here is to remove or clip away the road right-of-way. So before I do anything, I'm going to choose a snap tolerance. Then I'm going to select the road feature. At this point, I've selected two features. Let's try that again. Using my Shift key, I can undo the selection of the polygon and focus the selection on the road. Another shortcut for you. At this point, let's take the road feature and let's create a buffer zone around the road feature and clip away from the polygon. Now, this would usually be a twofold process, except that I have, from the editor menu, the ability to perform a clip. And I'm going to clip this with a 27 feet buffer zone around this particular road. Choose the OK button, and notice how the underlying polygon feature has been clipped away. And in fact, if I select the underlying polygon feature, notice how a new multi-part polygon has been created. This multi-part polygon can be exploded into single part if need be. Now, if I depressed my V key at this point, notice how I'm able to see the vertexes of the selected polygons that I have here. So that's another very useful shortcut key that you can look at. That concludes our demonstration at this point, and let's return back to our main topic. So we have discussed managing feature selection, controlling feature snapping, and sketching features using multiple tools and functions. I'm going to turn you over to Tom, and Tom's going to answer some questions for you.
Thanks a lot, Colin. Yeah, I have a lot of good questions here. I'll try and get through as many as I can. First question is from Stephanie in Fontana. She asks, is it possible to use graphics when choosing the snap to feature option? Actually, graphics don't work with the snap to feature option. You have to have it as a feature in your map. One way to work around this might be to have what we call construction features. And these are just feature classes that you have in your map while you're editing that have no purpose other than to use to construct other features. So what you may do is, instead of creating those graphics, create these features in your construction feature classes, and then snap to those features. I also went and looked online in our Arc scripts. I found a script that will actually convert graphics to features. So you could use that to take your existing graphics and convert them to your construction feature classes. And the name of that script is just convert graphics to features. So you can search for that in Arc scripts. And a little later, Colin will show you how to incorporate something like that into ArcMap. Next question came from Starla in Anchorage. Is buffer distance in pixels? No, actually the buffer distance is, like all other distances that are used in the editor, are in the coordinate system of the data frame. So whatever your coordinate system of the data frame is, those are going to be the units that you'll use inside of the editor. By default, that's the same as the data, but you can change that, and those units would change along with whatever coordinate system you decided. And as Colin was mentioning, you could also use other units in those dialogues as well with our unit conversion constants. Another question, Pete from Maplewood asked, is there a way to save selection options for specific layers? So, for example, the different colors for each layer, the selection color, saving that for use in another map? And the answer is yes. By default, you could just save your map document, and all your selection settings will be saved in that map document. Or you can save that layer out to a layer file. And when you do that, all those settings, all those properties that you set up, including the selection properties, will go in that layer file. And then when you use that layer file in any other map, it will be, all those properties will go along with it. Okay, looks like I have time for just one more. I got one. Keith from Anchorage asks, I've read that using the map cache will improve performance while editing. Will it make that much difference if I'm only editing data on my local machine? The answer is really, the short answer is no. If all your data is on your local machine, building a map cache isn't going to save you anything, isn't going to speed anything up, because what the map cache does is pull things local to your machine. But if you're working with data that's on a file server or maybe a multi-user geodatabase, then using that map cache can make things very quick, because it pulls a lot of the data that you're looking at in a local area, local to your machine. So all of those operations can happen very quick, and you're encouraged to do that while you're editing to speed things up. Okay, that's all I have time for. I'll turn it back over to Colin for a little bit more presentation.
Thanks, Tom. We're going to have a few more questions from Tom, so start sending those in for the next section, please. Our second topic this afternoon is solving feature adjustment problems. The idea with this topic was to introduce you to a variety of techniques or methods that you could use to correct typical feature adjustment problems. Again, we have three main challenges. The first challenge is I may have received a data set in digitizer inches, but I never received the actual georeferencing information for this data set. In other words, I have no idea where in the real world this data represents. But I do have an existing data set in UTM meters that I know the subdivision I received has to fit into. How do I adjust this unknown data to fit into my known data set? And what technique would I use to do this? Well, available with the ArcGIS software in ArcMap is the Spatial Adjustments toolbar. And the Spatial Adjustments toolbar has several different options. One of them, an option called Transformation. And using the transformation tools and identifying your source data and identifying your destination data, you have the ability to set several displacement links between the source and the destination datasets. Once you've created an appropriate number of links between source and destination, you can transform the source data to match the destination data. In other words, you can change the location of features in 2D coordinate space, essentially converting data in digitizer or scanner units into real-world units if you choose to. Now, this is a very, very useful function, and it's important to remember that the transformation tools are used across an entire data set. So all coordinates of a source will be matched or transformed to match those in the destination. The important thing to remember as well is that transform does not physically join the two data sets. It purely transforms the coordinates of the source into those of the destination. Usually, after transformation, you do a map join or a load of the transformed data into the destination data set. In other words, transformation won't automatically incorporate into one. Afterwards, you do map join or load to do that for yourself. The important thing with transformation, however, is to remember that it's across the entire data set. Now, a second challenge we may have is we've received a layer of data that does not quite match the underlying base layer of information in our database. In other words, the data set we've received is slightly distorted or is misaligned and needs to be forced to align properly to the underlying base data. How do we go about solving this? Again, available for us from the Spatial Adjustments toolbar is a set of options for rubber sheeting. Now, rubber sheeting, different to transform, is localized adjustment of data. So instead of adjusting all coordinate data, we're only adjusting information within a very defined area. And we can define this area by specifying something called an identity link. And in the graphic example you see here, I've placed two identity links down to hold, pretty much like putting a pin down and saying, nothing moves beyond this pin. I can further refine the area of adjustment by placing a polygon around the adjustment area that I would like to work with. Rubber sheeting is really fun since you add displacement links, you can use identity links, and you can also choose the method of rubber sheeting that should occur. It'll preserve features outside of the identity links and rubber sheet features within the identity or within the displacement area. I'm going to show you some of this in the demonstration as we get to that. But before we do, let's look at a third feature adjustment challenge. This happens typically when you receive data that falls across multiple data sets. In other words, I've got data that road data or river data or contour data that falls across more than one map sheet. And for some or other reason, perhaps the data doesn't match up perfectly. The source data from where it was captured may have been misaligned. We may have used different methods. Or in fact, there may actually have been slight datum shifts as well to mean or to give us the result of data that doesn't quite match. How do we go about fixing this problem? And again, from our Spatial Adjustments toolbar, we have a series of tools called edge matching tools. And the edge matching tools will allow us to align the features in the adjoining layers. In other words, we're going to adjust the edges only of one or both data sets to match each other. We identify one layer as source, one layer as target, and we choose the appropriate edge match technique to apply to the data. This again is localized and does not happen across the entire data set as it would have if we were using the transform function. Well, it looks like we're ready to show you some of these things in a demonstration. So allow me to bring in a new map document that has all of these different types of options available for us. Now, here's my very first scenario, and this is the transform scenario. Notice how in the transform scenario, I have new buildings and new parcels that are in the incorrect geographic space. I have simple buildings and simple parcels that are in the correct geographic space. And in fact, these new parcels that I have here should really fall into this new subdivision area that I'm looking at and pointing to right now. So that is my challenge. How do I transform this information to match into this study area? Well, the process is actually very simple, and before I begin, I need to load the Spatial Adjustments toolbar. So notice as I went to View and Toolbars, Spatial Adjustment toolbar is a new toolbar that I can bring in. In fact, sorry, that is not entirely a new toolbar. It's been around with the software for a fair amount of time. Bear in mind you can use this with an ArcView, an ArcEditor, or an ArcInfo license. Now, none of the functions on the Spatial Adjustment toolbar are currently active. This is because I need to start an edit session. So I'm going to launch and start an edit session. Now before I begin, keep in mind we need to set some snap agents. So let's do that. We're going to go down and we're going to set our snapping tolerances and snap agents. First thing I'm going to do is set the snap environment. And in this case, for simple parcels, I'd like the vertexes and the edges of the simple parcels to match the vertexes and edges of my new parcel data set. And in fact, I'm going to bring the new parcels and place them above so they have higher precedence over anything else. I'm also going to drag simple parcels below new parcels in the snapping environment so their precedence order is lower than my simple parcel. So its simple parcels need to be above new parcels. Let's continue with setting the actual snap tolerance. And in fact, instead of typing a snap tolerance, I'm going to zoom in a little. I'm going to show or illustrate the snap tolerance with the snap tolerance tool. Next step to do is to tell the software which data I intend to adjust. So I'm going to set my data adjustment data, and at this point I'm not going to adjust all the data. I'm only going to adjust my new buildings and new parcels which are unreferenced or in the wrong geographic space. Let's choose the OK dialog at this point. Another thing I need to do is I need to set the current adjustment method. Now since I'm transforming my data, I'm going to use an affine transformation. I also have the option for projective and similarity, and this is usually used for different types of data. Projective is best used on image data, for example. Let's choose affine. Now, the system is awaiting me to place several links. So let's go and place some of these links interactively. Choose the tool to create a link, and notice that as I move closer within the snap tolerance, my snapping occurs. Now I'm going to place my first link from the lower corner here to the appropriate location in my existing subdivision. Now notice that I had very little control here except for snapping to see what I was joining or connecting to. So let's use the magnifier window we spoke about a little earlier. And let's magnify this portion of data in order to place the beginning point of the link. Let's use the magnifier window in this area too, and let's place the next portion of the link. And I now have 2 links. Now for this data, I really intend to have 4 links placed down. This would be the optimum for this data, so I'm going to magnify and create the link again and show the appropriate location where this data should be connected or transformed to. And I'm going to place the final link at this point and my final link at this location right over here. Now I could keep the magnification window open, but since I intend to show you how the transform process works, I'm going to use the adjust function next. Let's turn to the adjust toolbar and choose the adjust function. And notice how simple that process was. I created several displacement links and my data was transformed based on the displacement links that I had created. Let's stop editing and let's change to the rubber sheeting. And let's show you how rubber sheeting can be done. I'm going to change my data frame and activate the rubber sheeting data frame. Again, remember we need to start editing in order to be able to use the spatial adjustment tools, and furthermore we need to set a snapping agent. Now in this case, I'm going to set my snapping agent to be the vertexes, edges, and ends of my imported street to match to my current existing street. Let's dismiss the snap environment, and let me just show you. So the imported streets are the red ones that are misaligned, that need to be rubber sheeted. Now remember, the intent of rubber sheeting is not to modify or to transform everything, but to do so in a very specific area. Before I begin, let's set the adjustment data, and I'd like to adjust only the imported streets at this point in time. The next thing I'd like to do is set the type of adjustment that I would like to execute. So from my adjustment methods, I'm going to choose the rubber sheet option to adjust. Furthermore, I'm going to place down several identity links or push pins to hold movement. I'm going to place them in these areas where I know my data looks as if it would be pretty well matched. So notice that I'm limiting adjustment to within or away from these limit adjustment links I've just added. The next step I could do is I could go and place several links myself manually. And in fact, I'm going to zoom to one of the areas and place some of these links. So I'm going to choose the tool. I'm going to place a link in this area. Now I'm going to pan a little, and I'm going to place another link in this area right about here. Let's zoom back out again to the source data, and if I choose to, I can place several links interactively across the data. And we're going to place one by zooming in a little more in this area right over here, and we're going to link to that option over there. Let's return. I'm going to show you how it's possible to have the software create several links on its own. So I'm going to zoom to this area here, and I'm going to use the tool to create automatic displacement links. So I'm going to select this feature, then select the feature to link to, and I should get an option to automatically place links. Perhaps my snap tolerance is a little big, so I'm going to make the snap tolerance a touch smaller and use the auto link option again. And I'm going to ask the software to automatically create 10 links in this study area or this area for me. Allow me to zoom out again and notice how the software has created automatic links for me in the area that I'm interested in. Now, I'm going to do the adjustment. Now, bear in mind, this is localized adjustment using the links that I have currently set. So let's perform the adjustment. And notice how the adjustment is really well done here, and it's done really, really well in this area here, but the adjustment is less specific and less clear in the areas where I have not placed any links. I did this intentionally to illustrate to you that rubber sheeting is localized adjustment, whereas transform is adjust of all coordinates. Let's stop our current edit session and let's have a look at how we would do an edge match. So we're going to stop editing at this point, and we're not going to save our edits. Let's switch to the edge match data frame, and I'd like to illustrate to you how I have two data sets and how their edges do not match. I have a southern stream and a northern stream data set at this point in time that I would like to edge match with each other. Again, the process of edge matching requires me to start an edit session, much like it did for all the other types of spatial adjustments that I wanted to perform in my data. So I've started an edit session. Again, I need to set my snapping agents. And in this case, I want to have my vertexes of northern and southern streams snapped, and perhaps ends if there are some ends available as well. Let's dismiss the snap environment, and let's set an interactive snap tolerance to be within a distance that big. Our next step would be to set the type of data that we're going to be adjusting. And keep in mind that I really don't want to adjust both data sets. I only want to adjust the southern data set. In other words, the red data needs to be adjusted to match to the blue data at this point in time. So I'm going to set that as my current adjustment layer. The next step I'd like to do is to ensure my adjustment method. In this case, it's going to be the edge snap option as my adjustment method. Now that I'm happy with that, I may also want to do one more thing, and this is to return to the options menu for spatial adjustment and ensure that my source layer, in other words, the layer that these links that I'm going to create starts from the southern layer and ends at the northern layer. In other words, I want the data below to be matched up to the data above. Now, if I wanted to, I could also choose different edge snap options. In this case, adjust to midpoint. And in that way, I would be adjusting both data sets to a midpoint between them. I'm going to choose not to do so at this point in time. I'm going to choose the OK button, and just to ensure southern streams match to northern streams. Choose the OK button, and at this point, I need to go and create the links. Well, before I do, let me just check that the adjustment method is set. Let me just check that southern streams are currently set, and let me go and create those links. Now, I could do this interactively if I wanted to, but perhaps what I'll do is create a magnifier window in this area here, and I'll show you how we use an automatic function to create the links for us. This is the auto edge match option, that'll create several links between the different edges. Notice how the box is illustrated for you in the magnify window as well as in your map display window. Now at this point, I have created several different links. Notice how the system's created them for us automatically. I'm going to dismiss the magnification window and I'm going to execute the actual adjustment at this point, the edge match, in other words, between the data. Choose Adjust and allow me to zoom in and illustrate to you how the edge matching has occurred. The two edges have been matched perfectly. Well, that concludes our second demonstration, and it gives us time now to look at some questions and answers. So in this last section, we spoke about spatial adjustments using transformation, rubber sheeting, and edge matching. I'm going to turn you over to Tom for some questions at this point. Tom?
Okay, thanks, Colin. I have a lot of good questions here. Let's see how many I get through. First, Beatrice from Babson Park asks, how do you separate multi-part polygons? Well, it's a pretty straightforward process. On the Advanced Editing toolbar, you'll find a tool called Explode, and that will break apart multi-part polygons, well, multi-part features into single-part features. Noko in New Ulm asks, how can we set up snap tips? That is under your editor options. So if you open the editor toolbar and then from the editor menu click options, on the general tab you'll see a show snap tips option. Just go ahead and check that checkbox and snap tips will show up. Chris from Campbell River asks a question, are there any problems, for example accuracy issues, when editing a file that has been reprojected into a data frame to a different coordinate system? This is a difficult question in that it has to do with the nature of projections themselves. Yes, you may run into some problems or unexpected behavior when editing in a projection other than the projection of the data frame, depending on the complexity of the projection. Just because the projection itself may be warping the feature appropriately as it should in that projection to the underlying data. Then when you look at it in another projection, it looks completely different. That kind of scenario can happen pretty easily when working in projected space. Therefore, the edits that you do if you're reprojecting on the fly should be mostly simple and in simple projections, like maybe just a simple zone conversion or something like that, not a datum shift or anything like that. Therefore, generally we recommend that if you're doing editing, edit in the same projection of your data. It will just make things easier and you'll get good feedback on the projections that you make. Lauren from Tacoma and Christine from Salem had some similar questions. Lauren asked, does this also work with raster images, and referring to the transformations? And the answer is yes, but it's under a slightly different set of tools. The toolbar is called the georeferencing toolbar, and it has basically the same workflow that you go through with the transformation tools with vector data. However, the two are really tailored to those specific data sets. So on the georeferencing toolbar, you'll see transformations specific to raster data, and then on the transformations toolbar for vector data, you'll see things about transferring attributes and things like that. So they have the same basic workflow, but they're really tailored to the specific data types that they work with. Nancy from Alexandria says, can you save rubber sheeting for later edits, or does it disappear when you close ArcMap? No, I presume you're talking about the links that you add in while you're doing the rubber sheeting, and all of those are saved in your map document. So if you get half of your links done and you need to go home for the day, then those will all be saved in your map document. You can open that up and work with it the next day. I think that's about all the time I have for. I'll pass it back over to Colin for a little bit more presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. Well, that brings us to our last topic for this afternoon, and that is add more editing functionality to ArcMap. Now, my intent with this particular section was to introduce you to a variety of slight enhancements that you can make to your software that'll make you more efficient and, in fact, give you the ability to do things that might not necessarily be available in the software directly. So let's have a look at how we can customize our editing environment, and also how we can download and possibly install some developer sample tools or toolbars that would help you during an edit. One of the things I do for myself quite often is I have created custom toolbars. And this is a very simple process from the Customize dialog under the Tools menu to create a new toolbar. And what I've done with that customized toolbar is I've dragged and created new instances of several different common tools that I use quite often. I like to put the undo and redo buttons, for example, on my own toolbar since I make mistakes, and they're at the top of the application, and I often want to use them when I'm working down below in something that I'm editing. So customized dialogues and creating new toolbars are very, very easy. In fact, from the customized dialog, creating a new toolbar is really very simple. When you create one, the choice is to store this either in your normal NXT as part of the template, so this toolbar will always be present, or to save it in the current map document that you may be working with. At this point, when you're using the customized dialog, you also have the option of actually doing custom keys. In other words, some of those shortcut keys I showed you earlier, well, it's here where you can see what they are, and in fact, it's also here that you can create your own by assigning individual keystrokes to specific commands, perhaps editor commands. In this case, the flip editor command has been assigned the Control F key. So by holding Control F down while I'm selecting it, while I have a feature selected, will perform a flip of that feature. Changes from its beginning endpoints, in other words. Developer samples are another area I'd like to urge you to investigate. If you've installed a complete installation of your software, you will have also installed the ArcGIS developer samples. And as part of the developer samples, if you look at your ArcGIS installation area, under Developer Help, VB6 Help, you'll get access to the ArcGIS Developer Help area. Now, this Developer Help area has a host of information on how you can create new things, how you can do add-ins to the software. But more importantly, it has a samples area that I would like to urge you to investigate. Within that samples area, many development tools or developer tools are available for you. These are samples or snippets of code that have been created that might not have been included in the final software, and some of our developers may have created toolbars for things as a proof of concept. Many of these are available for you, and you can in fact go and use them by installing them into ArcMap and putting them to great use and effect if you wanted to. Now, if you have not installed the Developer Help, all is not lost. You can go to the ArcGIS Developer Online site at esri.com. And in fact, the URL for this is available on our screen right now. This is a mirror of the exact same developer help that you would have installed with your software, except that the samples area on the ArcGIS Developer Help Online is probably going to be more current than your installation developer help. And in fact, many more samples and tools are made available with this online area. Somewhere else I'd like you to look, or urge you to look, is at arcscripts.esri.com. And this is the area where users such as yourselves may feel free to share individual tools and things with each other. I found some very, very useful tools under the ArcScripts environment that I've put to great use for users. And in fact, I'm going to show you some of these in the next couple of minutes when I get down to doing a demonstration. Now, whether you use ArcScript tools or whether you use some of the developer samples, the chances are that you'll receive these tools in the form of a DLL. In other words, the person who has created the tool may have packaged the tool up into a dynamic link library. Sometimes when you download, these DLLs are zipped up to save some space. So if necessary, unzip the DLL. The next thing you may want to do is you may want to install this DLL to create the appropriate tool or toolbar that the creator of the software may have made. So from the Customize dialog under the Tools menu in ArcMap, you can choose the Add from File option. Add from file will prompt you to find and locate the DLL. Once located, by choosing an OK button, the DLL will be executed or it will be installed. In this case of the example I'm showing you here, this DLL installed several new objects for line editing, and in fact all of these individual tools are now found on a new toolbar the creator had made. This toolbar is added to the list of toolbars, and by checking it on, I could actually use it during an edit session. Now, instead of me having to search for all of these tools in different places or write some new ones, they're available on a single toolbar. Really very efficient and easy to do. Well, let me show you some of these in a software demonstration, and then when we're done with this, we'll take some more questions and answers from Tom. So let's show you a few of the current common edits that we might want to do. So here I have a default application, and I'm going to show you how to create your own new toolbar. So from the Tools menu, from my Customize dialog, notice the Toolbars tab is active, and I have a new button. I'm going to create a new toolbar, and I'm going to call this toolbar Collins Edit Tools. Let's see what happens. Well, at this point, a new toolbar has been made on the interface for me. Notice it's empty. So I'm not going to write any software right now, but I do want to put some of the common edit tools that I use onto my new toolbar. So I've changed to my Commands tab. I'm going to scroll down, and from the Edit menu, I like to use Undo and Redo quite often. So I'm going to use the Undo tool. See what I'm doing? I'm picking the tool and I'm dragging it onto the toolbar. I'm going to do the same with Redo. I pick the tool, I drag it, and I drop it onto my toolbar. Now, similarly, I'm going to do the same thing from the Editor menu. And remember earlier I've been using the Snap Tolerance tool? Well, this is how I got the Snap Tolerance tool on a toolbar. I found it in the Editor tool set or command list, dragged it onto a toolbar. And I might do the same with the Split tool, and I may actually do the same with a tool called the Scale tool, which we can use quite effectively to scale features if need be. Now I'm ready to use my toolbar, so I dismiss the Customize dialog. Notice the toolbar can be docked at any location, or it could be left floating. As I start an edit session, notice how the tools become active. As I select a new feature, perhaps at this one here, notice that I could use the tools to execute some form of edit, an interactive, and notice how my Undo tool is now active, my Redo tool is now active again. Well, let's dismiss this menu and let's show you how you bring in a new tool that you may have downloaded from the web somewhere. So again, from our Tools dialog, from the Customize area, from the Toolbars area, I'm going to choose to bring or to add in a DLL with some line editing tools that I have located. So I'm going to choose Add from File. Now, Add from File prompts me to search for the DLL. Now, to save some time, I have it really close by, and I have unzipped the DLL. Pick the DLL, choose the Open button, and notice it's added several new objects, including a toolbar for me. When I choose the OK button, the toolbar becomes active. And in fact, by checking it on, I can see what it looks like. I'm going to move this out of the way for a minute, and I'm going to illustrate to you what this toolbar looks like. Notice that the developer of this tool has taken several tools and written several of their own tools to allow us to see vertices, to see undershoots, to see overshoots, to convert line to polygon, to do replace sketch, and other useful functions. This is just really to illustrate to you how simple it is to create a toolbar, and in fact how to incorporate a developer's script from time to time to enhance your editing environment and make you more productive. Well, that concludes my software demonstration, so I'm going to turn you over to Tom in a minute. In this last topic, we looked at creating a custom toolbar, and we looked at developer sample tools and toolbars and how to download and install those. So, Tom, over to you for some questions.
Thanks a lot, Colin. Okay, I've got a couple here. John is asking, I have the shortcut key list from 8x, but I would like an update to that list for 9.0. Where can I get this? Well, you can find it in the ArcGIS desktop help in one of two locations, and it depends on what kinds of shortcut keys you're interested in. If you're interested in shortcut keys for mapping, then under the ArcMap book, then Getting Started with ArcMap, there's a topic, it's the second one from the bottom, called Keyboard Shortcuts in ArcMap, and these are all about your mapping keyboard shortcuts. Now, with regard to the editing keyboard shortcuts, you could go under the Editing in ArcMap book, Getting Started with Editing in ArcMap, and then the fourth topic down is Shortcut Keys for Editing in ArcMap, and those are the shortcut keys specific to editing, and there's a lot of them all listed there, and you can get all those shortcut keys for editing. Beatrice from Babson Park asks, is there a way to delete vertices without having to right-click each one? Good question. First, you have to be in an edit sketch, so you'd have to be creating a new feature or modifying an existing feature, and then you can right-click on that with your sketch tool. If you right-click on that sketch and click Properties, you'll see an Edit Sketch Properties dialog that pops up. With that dialog, you can select multiple vertices at once and delete all of them at once by right-clicking and click Delete, or by pressing your Delete key. William from Alameda asks, when I'm editing and my task is set to modify feature, and with the sketch tool selected, how can I make a vertex that is not active become active? Well, again, with that Edit Sketch Properties dialog, you can select the different vertices in your sketch, and you'll see them highlight and activate in the sketch when you do that. The other thing that you could do is right-click on the sketch itself and click Flip. You'd do that if you wanted to add some geometry to the other end of your sketch. Okay, I only have time for one more question. Jason in Olympia asks, I work on a lot of line editing with a large amount of vertices. When I start an editing session, the line and vertices turned green. The vertices are all small size. Can I change the color to black and increase the size of the vertices? Well, this is one of those instances where you'll go to the ArcGIS developer online, like Colin just described, and find a really nice utility for changing the symbology of the sketch. Under Samples in the editing book, third one down is Change Sketch Vertex Symbolization. And with that sample, you can change the symbolization to whatever you want. So that would be a useful tool for you, Jason. Okay, that's all I have time for. Colin, back to you.
Yeah, sure looks like we are running out of time. Thank you very much, Tom. I'd like to point out that if you enjoyed this afternoon's presentation, you may want to look at several virtual campus courses that are available for you to investigate as well. We offer a virtual campus course called Creating and Editing Geodatabase Features with ArcGIS 9, and perhaps you may want to look at creating and editing geodatabase topology with ArcGIS 9 as well. There are also several instructor-led training classes such as Building Geodatabases 2 and Creating and Editing Parcels with ArcGIS is also another useful one, as is the Introduction to ArcGIS 2. Remember the downloads and the developer online that we've spoken about, and also remember to look at your product documentation, specifically at the ArcGIS 9 Editing in ArcMap book. On behalf of ESRI, I'd like to thank you all for attending this afternoon. We hope you enjoyed today's seminar.